Hi, good day. I am not aware of the time you're listening to this or you are coming across this video, but then you're welcome to the day one or the first video on our IELTS tutorial session, the first most important video, or rather the first module in the IELTS test, or the first segment of the IELTS test, depending on whatever you want to call it. So today we'll be looking at the speaking. Now the speaking test, basically, what is the speaking test? We all know that the IELTS is divided into speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So today we'll be looking at the speaking. Now, usually the speaking comes within a week, within 7 days to the main IELTS test dates. That is to say, within 7 days to the main IELTS test dates. That is to say, if you are writing on Saturday, from the Sunday before that Saturday, that is when you would have the speaking test. You should be expecting a date for your speaking test within that time frame. So now the speaking test basically checks you on how well you are able to address spoken language. Okay, let me read what we have on the screen, what we have here on the screen. They said the IELTS speaking test, just like every other part of the test, checks your ability to comprehend the English language. The speaking test is specialized in testing your ability to express yourself in oral communication with other users of the language. Now, we all know what speaking is. How well are you able to express yourself orally, or what we say verbally? How well are you able to express yourself? That is basically what the speaking test checks you on. That is basically what the speaking test checks you on. So now in all this, we move. Let's continue. The next part is the parts into which the speaking test is divided. The speaking test appears in 3 sections or in 3 parts. Section 1, which is usually an interview of 4 to 5 minutes, Here, the examiner introduces himself, and you introduce yourself, more like an introductory aspect of the test, where they would ask you funny questions about yourself, basically questions about yourself. Now, I would choose to call this the familiar questions part. I would choose to call this the familiar questions. That's this part 1. I would choose to call it the familiar questions, because questions you'd be asked here, are questions that you are ordinarily familiar with. Basically, questions about yourself, questions about where you stay, questions about your origin, questions, etc. Questions that you wouldn't even have to blink an eye to answer them. That is the kind of questions you would be asked in this part. They would ask you your name. But then there's a problem that many people have. Many people, basically Africans. When they ask you, what is your name? There is this tendency that you reply with, my name is, or my names are. That my names are. It's one thing that most Africans confuse, because we have plenty names, maybe up to 3 names. Then they ask you, what is your name? You tell them, my names are. Please, Your names are not. Your name is. Your name is. That is the first part. Then again, there is this tendency that the part of repeating my name. When you are asked a question, what is your name? You should simply go to the answer, Joe Philip. You don't need to repeat the question because it looks to the examiner like you're not even sure of what your name is. You're trying to buy time. When you say my name is, I know in French, they will say je m'appelle, which is my name. But then to be fluent in the speaking, you don't have to repeat this part. There's no need repeating this. That is one twist there. Then again, there's something when they say, tell us about your family. There's this mistake that a lot of married people usually make. This is for the married ones. For the unmarried ones, you can simply still go ahead and tell them what you want to tell them. Tell them about your family and your siblings and the rest. But there's this problem that there's this trap that married people set for themselves. Okay, tell us about your family. I'm from a family of 5. We have this number of kids, but I am married. That is for the married people now. You now tell them, okay, after you've told them that you're from a family of 5, this is the number of people in your family. You are talking about your father's family. But now you repeat the fact, you now tell them that you are married. Now you're setting a trap for yourself at that point. You're setting a trap for yourself at that point, which is not proper. It is not proper to set a trap for yourself. You simply tell them about your own family, the family you're creating with your husband or with your wife. So that is about the section 1. So I'll recap. First, when you are asked your name, there is no need to repeat. What is your name? Joseph Philip or Joe Philip. You mention the name as it is on your passport. Then again, they ask you, tell us about your family. If you're married, you tell them about the family you have with your wife or with your husband. If you're not, you tell them about your father's family where you have your siblings and the rest. So basically, that is all about the section 1. Then section 2, they said lengthy speech or discussion. Now, this is where many people find the speaking test difficult. This is where many people find the speaking test difficult. I'll call this a cue card question. I'll call this a cue card question. I'll call this a cue card question. This is where they will give you 1 minute to think and then 2 minutes to address a topic. Now that topic is usually written in form of a little card. A little piece of paper will be handed over to you. You'll be expected to speak on this. Let me quickly bring up examples of this cue card. Let me quickly bring up an example of this cue card quickly. Let me quickly bring up an example of this cue card quickly. Now, this is okay, so this is it. Where this thing is running to. Okay, so this is an example of a cue card. This is an example of a cue card. Please forget about the highlighting. I would actually explain it much later. I would explain much about this in a short while. Now, the cue card simply tells you, describe, for instance, this question, they said, describe a problem that affects the environment in the area where you live. You should say what the problem is, what causes the problem, what people feel about the problem, and explain what could be done to salvage the situation or what could be done to solve the problem. Now, that is the cue card. That is how the cue card will look like. It will bring these three things. Now, you see this marking in front. You see this marking in front of it. Not the flood, the flood. It's flood. Now, first of all, they said what the problem is. Now, your ability to address this in a short while is where many people find the speaking test difficult. This is where many people find the speaking test difficult. So now what I have simply done here is to highlight what I would need to, what I would do if I were writing the exam. Now, the first thing they said, what the problem is, it's the flood. Now, I could simply make a speech like, a common problem that affects my environment or that affects the environment where I stay is a flood. Usually, this is caused by a blockage of the drain or drain blockage. Now, you see that I have addressed what causes this. And what do people feel about this problem? I said it's annoying. Okay. A common problem, a very common problem facing that affects the environment where in the area where I live is flood. That is to say, the environment is always flooded. Now I'm speaking. I'm not explaining to you now. So let me start again. A common problem affecting the area where I live is flood. When it rains, the water usually collates in many areas in many parts of this area. The water barely finds where to run to, and it is destroying the road with each passing raining season. Now, the cause of this problem is the fact that most of the drains in our area or in the area where I live have been blocked due to disposal of waste and other things. And people usually feel this or see this as very annoying, or it is annoying to the people in this area. Now, to solve this problem, I believe that a regular cleanup of the drainage is necessary. So that is simply how I would simply address this, but I would have to expatiate. I won't be able to do that because this is a video tutorial. I'll send us a link on some things to do, but then let's watch out for some things now. Now, when addressing this part, there's a method that could easily allow you to do this easily. It is called the PPF. It is called the PPF, the past, present, and future method of speaking. The past, present, and future methods. Now, what does this mean? This shows you how to use complex grammar and give you ideas for your response. Now, first of all, when you're giving a question, pay attention. Pay attention to start with a time introduction. Now, the speech I gave earlier, I did not start with a time introduction. I did not start with a time introduction. I'll send us a video to go and watch that addresses this PPF method. I'll send us a video to watch. I'll send it to the WhatsApp group for us to watch, and I'll also attach it to this video for us to watch and see how we can use the PPF method. Now, another thing is to compare the past with the present. Another is to talk about habits, about old habits. Then another is to use emotion. Another is to talk about new experiences. Another is to provide a backstory. Then reflect globally. And then lastly, consider the importance of what you're saying. Now, let me explain this one by one. They said, pay attention to a time introduction or a time intro. Now, this forces you, using the time intro simply means you could simply use something like, when I was younger, when I was a kid, several years ago, like last 2 weeks. Now that is a time introduction. Okay, last 2 weeks, last 2 years, one very common problem in my environment was flood. You see that now. That is what the time intro is. That is simply what the time intro is. Now compare the past to the present, e.g., when I was younger or last 2 years, a common problem in my environment was flood. But right now, a common problem in my environment is insecurity. Or a common problem that affects the environment right now in my place is, in the area where I stay, is, okay, right now, sorry about that distraction. Right now, last 2 years, what affects, a common problem that affects the environment in the area where I stay was flood. But right now, it is a problem caused by humans, which is illegal migration. Then that is comparing the past to the present. Then talk about old habits. The environment used to be this, and then, but now it's this. Then they said, provide a backstory. Talk about about your previous experience with both problems. Then lastly, reflect globally. Compare what people think or do with what you do about the situation with what you think or do. That is when I'm talking about what people feel about the problem. That is where I would now reflect globally. Then lastly, I'll consider why it is important, why what I have said is important. So that is basically about addressing the cue card, basically. Then let's quickly move on to this section 3. Let's move on to section 3. Let's move on to section 3. Now, section 3 is the part where they call the discussion questions. By discussion questions, we simply mean the examiner will now ask you questions about what you've spoken, what you've talked about on the topic you've talked about earlier. On the topic of your cue card, they would ask you questions regarding what you've spoken about in your cue card. That is what they will do in the section 3. At this point, you don't have issues, or let me not say, you don't have issues with being consistent with your story. Now, one thing I didn't state earlier is, except in the part 1, in the speaking test, when you are asked a question and you are not sure of the answer, let the examiner know that you really do not know much about this topic, but you'd say something. Now, I said in one of the videos, I think in the introductory video, yes, it was in the introductory video, where I said the IELTS test, the IELTS examiner they do not care about the correctness of your answer. They only care about how well you can address the topic. What they only care about is how well you've been able to address the topic you are addressing. So nobody is concerned, no one is concerned about how well or the correctness of your answer. They only want to know, okay, was this person able to discuss this topic properly or not? So that is all they care about. So quickly, let's move to tips on how you can answer the speaking question. Okay, so now, first of all, they said basic speaking techniques or basic speaking tips. Basic speaking tips. These include, the first one is focus on what is important when you're preparing. Now, this is basically for those people who think that their grammar is bad. Except you have a particularly bad grammar, you do not need particularly bad command of the English language. You do not need to pay extra attention to pronunciation and others. What am I trying to say? Except you know, and everyone complains about it, that your command of the English language, your use of spoken language is bad. You do not need to pay extra attention to English lessons or to pronunciation lessons. You do not need to pay attention to this. All you simply need to do is practice more on how you can address questions as they come. That is one. Then the next one, avoid nerves of any form. I talked about exam tension in the previous video, in the introductory video. Now, this is why I talked about exam tension in the previous video. Usually, a lot of people get nervous when it comes to an exam. And then because of an already existing mindset that, oh, the IELTS test is so difficult. Because of an already existing mindset that the IELTS test is so difficult, you find it, many people get this tension when they are going for the test. Not just the speaking test this time, but in the entire test. Now, as pertains to the speaking test, this can be difficult because you are taking a test. Yes, I know, but you need to try not to be nervous. You need to try not to be nervous. If you can't speak much because you are nervous, then you may get a lower score, as the examiner needs to hear you speak as much as possible. The examiner needs to hear you speak as much as possible. So you just need to try to avoid tension or nervousness. Then the next one, they said extend or elaborate on your answers. Extend or elaborate on your answers. Extend or elaborate on your answers. What do they mean by this? It is as simple as it can be. It is as simple as it seems. When they ask you, okay, tell me about yourself, you don't just tell them, my name is Joe Philip. You need to tell them what you do. Or maybe they ask you what you do, you tell them, okay, I'm a teacher. No, you need to elaborate on that. What do you do? I'm a teacher with IELTS Blast Nigeria, teaching English language. Now, I have answered 3 questions with just 1 question that I was asked. So that is one. So you need to always elaborate on your answers, extend or elaborate on your answers. Then stay on topic. When they ask you about robotics, and you're not talking about, they ask you about robots, and then you are not talking about software, that's a problem. Or maybe they ask you about sports, and then you're not talking about food or any other thing, that's a problem. Try as much as you can to stay on topic. It is important to extend your answers as mentioned above, but then make sure you stay on the topic. Don't talk about anything that comes to your head if it's not answering the question. If it's not answering the question, don't talk about anything that comes to your mind. Then the next one is do not rely on the examiner. Now, a lot of people get to think that, oh, the examiner will urge them, especially in the Q card part, when they've spoken at short length, and they tend to think that the examiner will urge them on. Now, this is a trap. If the examiner urges you on, there's this tendency that you would go out of topic. Relying on the examiner will make you leave the topic that you're discussing. There's that tendency that it will happen. Then another thing, the examiner will not prompt you to say more if you did not say enough. So just try to answer questions as fully and as clearly as possible. Then the next one, they said, understand the questions. Understand the questions. If you do not understand the question, then ask the examiner to repeat the question. But this can be tricky. Sometimes you can ask the examiner to repeat the question and the examiner repeats exactly what he just asked, which you did not understand earlier. So now you could simply ask the examiner to rephrase the question if possible. But if you ask him, okay, repeat, if you tell the examiner to repeat, then he will definitely repeat exactly what he has said. But in this case, ask the examiner questions where you do not understand. Then next, do not show off. Do not show off. Now, what do we mean by do not show off? You want to do your best to impress the examiner, right? Now, but try to keep within your capabilities. A lot of people try to fake an accent. A lot of people try to fake British accents, American accents, Australian accents, Russian accents. In this exam, doing that might land you in trouble. Because if you cannot keep up with it, then there's going to be a problem. Then there will be problem. So that is, you don't just need to show off. And then a lot of people tend to show that, oh, they know a lot about the English vocabulary. Oga, madam, if they catch you, okay, sorry, if they catch you, okay, this is it. This is what I'm trying to say now. If you try to use a lot of high-flown words from the English vocabulary and words or your grammatical structure, you are using big words, yes, but your grammatical structure it spoils your grammatical structure, and then those words, you're not using them in the right way they are supposed to be used, then that is a problem. Then that is going to be a problem. So you simply have to keep within words that you know. Usually, I usually advise my students, please, when you're going for the test, be as natural as possible. Be as natural as possible. I don't mean being natural in the sense that the ladies will take it. No, that's not what I meant. What I meant is be as natural as possible when you're talking to the examiner. Be yourself. Be yourself. If you have this mother tongue interference, except you replace R with L, where you're supposed to have rake, you now have lake, then there's a problem. Then there's a problem. So that is one. Just be as natural as possible when going for the test. Then the next thing we have here is maintain eye contact with the examiner. Try to have eye contact with the examiner. This does not mean you need to look at him or her all the time, please. It does not mean that you need to be looking at the examiner's eye all the time. But it is normal when you're having a conversation with someone to spend quite a lot of time looking at them, as it keeps their attention. So that's the secret. To keep the examiner's attention, try to maintain eye contact to the examiner. But this doesn't mean that in the whole time you're speaking, you're looking at the examiner, please. Now, I didn't mention earlier that the speaking test will take 15 minutes or less. So during this whole time, I didn't say that for this whole 15 minutes, you should be looking at the examiner's eye to tell him, my eye, no, they fear your eye, something like that. But then simply maintain eye contact. Try to, as much as possible, look at the examiner from time to time. Look at the examiner's face from time to time, as this helps to keep their attention. Then another one is listen carefully to questions asked. You need to listen very carefully to the questions so you can answer them correctly. Now, when you listen carefully to questions, you tend to understand them. That was at point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At point 6, we talked about understanding your questions, right? Now, to understand these questions, you need to listen to them carefully. It is very important. And then, for example, now an example of why you need to listen carefully is if you are asked a question about an event in the past, to answer that question, you are now answering it, you are now using present tense to address this question, then it's a problem. What was the name of your first pet dog? Maybe the dog has died. That's in the past. So you need to listen carefully to what you were asked and then address it properly. Now, the examiner did not know that the dog has died, but you told him earlier that the dog had died. So you need to simply pay attention to all questions that are asked. Then lastly, be on time. This is very common with Nigerians. This is very common with Nigerians. Not just Nigerians, Africans entirely. Now, we call this African time. African time. They say your exam is by 11:45. Your speaking test is by 11:45. You are coming by 11:50. Sorry, it doesn't work that way in this test. Please take note of that. It doesn't work that way with this test. So this is it. These IELTS speaking tips basically will not be of much use to you if you are not on time. Everything, all your practice, all your speaking practice will not be of much use to you if you're not on time. Now, that gets you on a bad start. Or maybe they said your exam is 11:45 and then you're getting there by 11:40. Now, already you are destabilized. So that's another thing. Already you are destabilized. So you need to be there at least 30 minutes to 40 minutes before the start time. So if they said your test is by 11:45, you should be there by 11 o'clock at least, so that you would have time to take in the environment, or to acclimatize yourself to the environment, or get used to the environment, so that it wouldn't be a problem for you or you wouldn't be tensed when you are with the examiner. You know, a lot of people, when they come to a new environment, they are usually they don't usually get along easily like that. And then there's an adage I've been approved about Colin, that where they said, far we enter new compound and one leg we take the stand. So that is all about the speaking test for today. We'll see in the next video.
Tying you to me, I'm happy in your company with no emotion, 'cause